Good morning, beautiful people. It is Sarah Willoughby from sarahwilloughby.com.au. This morning, I am here with the beautiful Kate Nguy. Kate and I have recently connected, and I absolutely love the work that she is doing. So I wanted to bring Kate on to have a conversation. Good morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation today. I want to start by sharing Kate's bio. I cannot do it justice, so I'm just going to read it to you, all the crazy, amazing work that Kate is doing. So, Kate is a sacred womb and cycle mentor, a moon mother, yoga therapist, and fertility coach. She supports women to radically defy the stories they are told about their fertility so that they can attune to the sacredness of their womb and feel empowered in their body's ability to heal and create life. There is so much in there that we're going to unpack. Kate went through her own fertility journey 10 years ago when she had reoccurring ectopic pregnancies and was told that her chances were slim to have a successful pregnancy without removing her last remaining fallopian tube and relying solely on IVF. A journey that I understand all too well. Through exploring a lot of alternative therapies, Kate healed her one remaining fallopian tube and went on to have 3 successful pregnancies, which is so exciting, without medical intervention of ART. Kate uses her story to inspire others to explore the powerful wisdom of the womb, to trust in its healing potential. Wow. I know you have an amazing story, Kate, to share, and I would love to start with you sharing that with our audience today.
You know, it's really interesting because as you're saying it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that happened. But you know
Yes.
what? Like working with hundreds of women on this fertility journey, each of them has an amazing success story. Like I'm always so blown away about women and what they're faced with for adversities, how they've persevered, and then how these miracles happen, right? Or how, pregnancy lands. And yeah, it's amazing. So to all the women out there that have been on the journey and have a baby in your arms, congratulations, you did it. And for all those women that are still on the journey, I just want to say, like, you are so far from being done right now. Like there is so much. I'm hoping that this conversation is going to create and inspire so much hope and joy and curiosity for you to dig deeper into what is your medicine, which is very different from everybody else's medicine. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from my own experience, is that like every woman probably on this journey, you've read 110 different books about the things you should be doing to heal
Absolutely.
your body or better your chances. You've listened to every podcast, you have gone to see every specialist. But the truth of it is that your own intuition, your own inner knowing is what will help you really craft what is your solution. And that's because we all have different experiences. We've all had different things up until this moment that have impacted us in some way and have impacted in how we're feeling in our fertility journey. And so yeah, that's where I'm going to start. But as for my own journey, where I was at, so this was like 10 years ago now. It's so hard to believe it's been so many years. 10 years ago, I had my first ectopic pregnancy, and it was unbeknown to me that that was even happening. I went into the hospital with severe pain and bad cramping, and that's where we discovered that I was pregnant and that I was about to rupture. And so it was an emergency situation of we have to get in there, remove that tube before something fatal happens. And so I was rushed into surgery, didn't have any time to process what was happening. And I didn't question anything either. To be honest, this is where your intuition comes in. Everything in my body knew that this was where I needed to be. I was with the people that I needed to be with, and I put 100% trust in them. And so I went through that surgery. The tube was removed and I had one remaining tube. And they said that while they were in there, they explored the other tube, that it looked like it should be okay. There was some minor scarring, but they cleared it up, and that I really shouldn't have anything much to worry about going forth in my conception journey. And so I didn't think much of it, to be honest. After that, it kind of lit up this little bit of a desire to build my family now. And so my husband, now partner at the time, boyfriend, common law, living together, we decided that, yeah, let's try, like, let's officially make this happen. Since we have one good tube, we've just been through this devastation, like, let's just move forward.
Yeah.
And so we tried, and we got pregnant within a few months, which was super exciting. But then I found out that it was another ectopic pregnancy. And we caught it early enough. Because of my history, they had me come in to do a follow-up appointment quite quickly, around that 6-week mark when they can detect a heartbeat. And yeah, they just said that there was another ectopic pregnancy and that we had to terminate. So we did. And we had big questions of like, what does this mean? What does this mean going forward? And so we were referred to the fertility clinic because of our history. And so we went to the fertility clinic, and they pretty much said, like, you seem to have issues with your tubes. So you can continue to keep trying, but most likely the best solution is to remove that tube and then just go into IVF, because even with IVF, with that remaining tube there, it can still implant in the tube. And so let's just remove it. We know it's a troubled spot, so let's just get rid of it. And I walked away with that going, that doesn't feel good. Let's do some other research and dig into this and explore. And so we did. I, as in most cases, the woman's the one that took on the research. Was like, I'm going to heal my body. And so I started to, I never grew up in a world where I knew about acupuncture, or I hadn't even explored any energy medicine whatsoever. Like, I never tried anything besides conventional medicine. And so I went on Dr. Google and kind of researched, what are the chances first of a successful pregnancy after, having ectopic pregnancies. And 10 years ago, there was nothing on the World Wide Web. There was nothing. It just said, like, good luck. You're always going to have them. There's no success rate, which was the most defeating feeling ever. Because now I've had a doctor tell me this, and I've had pregnancies that are telling me this, and now I have Google telling me this, and it just didn't feel right. So that's when I looked up alternative therapies for ectopic pregnancies, or to help heal the tube, and acupuncture came up. And I was like, well, never tried it. What can it hurt?
Yeah.
And it was the first time ever on this journey that I had someone sit with me, talk me through it without asking for payment, like, was on the phone holding space for me, heard my story, and said, there's so much we can do still. Your journey is not over yet. And I remember just feeling like I just felt seen. I felt heard. And I think that is so important when we're on this journey, is the first time that we are seen for our experience, the first time we are heard for our experience. That is the first stone in the healing river, is to be known that, we are important. What we're going through is important. So of course I jumped on board, and I was like, do what you got to do. And so we had a plan put in place. He introduced me to a bunch of different things I should be doing, like fertility massage and a naturopathic doctor, Chinese herbs. There was a whole list of stuff that I started to do at that point. And then it also expanded my curiosity to go, well, what else is out there? Like, what else could I do? And I remember after our very first treatment that I had with him, and I always share the story because I think it's like the power and the potential of what can happen when we do something that's nourishing for us versus puts us deeper in that fear state, is being very unfamiliar with what acupuncture was going to do for me. I went in for that first treatment, had it, left, didn't really feel anything. I was like, okay, that was something. I don't know what. And then I went back for my next appointment a week later, and he was like, how are you feeling this week? And I'm like, well, the weirdest thing happened. I was in traffic and I felt like I should have road rage like I normally do, but yet nothing is coming up. Like, I just can't get angry. Like, I just feel content. And he's like, that's how you know it's working. I was like, oh, okay. I feel good in my body. That's what that is. And so that was the first experience of starting to look at it, of like, rather than seeing a statistic, or rather than seeing something that could be tested and measured, it was a felt sense within me of, is something working? So I was highly sold on energy medicine and highly sold on acupuncture. And it was a year of trying and not getting pregnant, which was so odd because we got pregnant so quickly. And so it was like, it was this blip in the road that I couldn't even comprehend. I'm like, I don't understand why it's not happening. Now, being on the other side, it's because I was under so much stress. Like, even though I was doing these things, I was putting myself under so much stress and worry, which even if you don't intentionally do it, that's what the fertility journey does. It just puts us
Absolutely.
in this constant state of every cycle, waiting and counting. And like, there is nothing worse than counting the days in a cycle. And that's what I was spinning in. And so we got pregnant again a year later, or before we got pregnant again, we visited the IVF clinic again. And she was like, IVF, that's the only option. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, you have no other options. This is never going to work. And I remember walking out again, and this time I felt completely devastated. And I told my husband, there has to be more than just broken. Like, there has to be, like, this does not feel good. And knowing how young, like, we weren't super young, we were in our 30s, but knowing where we were in our stage of our life, I couldn't afford multiple rounds of IVF. And I knew the statistics of what it would take to get pregnant. It could take up to 3 rounds of IVF before a successful one might happen. And in my head, I was just doing the math, and I was like, we can't do that. So even we give it one shot, or we put all of our money into having one child, but that's where our story ends. We don't have more children than that. We can't. At least that's what my analytical mind was telling me. So it just didn't feel good. And so I was like, no, I have to put everything in this, and I got to heal my body. And so I, at that third ectopic, when that happened, it was like a week after that appointment with the IVF clinic. I remember when we found out, I was so excited. I was like, yes, we're pregnant. This is the one that's going to work, because I've been doing a year of all these therapies. I got this. Like, this is the one. I'm not going to be disappointed. And I went in, and they said it was another ectopic. And I remember saying, I don't believe it. Like, even that experience felt cold, because I was brought in like everyone else is to get your ultrasound done. But it's almost like they read my history, quickly looked and said, no, this is what your history says. It's an ectopic. And I remember walking out of there going, did you really look? Like, are you sure? Because I have no pains, I have no symptoms, and I know what those pains and symptoms are like. And I have nothing. In both of the previous ones, I had pain and symptoms, and I had nothing. And so I remember just feeling like you didn't even hold space for me. You didn't even talk to me like I had valid concerns about what you just performed on me. And so I remember I didn't even get dressed yet. I just called my acupuncturist. I had him on speed dial. I called him, and I was like, this doesn't feel good. And he was like, okay, well, they're not going to see you right now again. I can guarantee you they're not going to. So he's like, you have to go to the hospital. So go to the hospital, listen to what they have to say. And when they tell you that you need to terminate, tell them that you need 24 hours to think about it. Because in 24 hours, you have no pains, you have no symptoms. You should be fine for 24 hours. And if you have a symptom, go back to the hospital, right? Like, logical. And so he's like, but you have all night to sit on this and think about it and figure out what your right next best step is. And so we went home and we thought about it. And I was like, I cannot terminate this pregnancy without a second opinion. So I went back to the same clinic the next day and said, I want another ultrasound. And this is why I want it. And they had so many different people come in to the waiting room to ask me why. Like, I think I had 4 different people come in and say, are you sure? Like, you just had this. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. Like, you're asking me to terminate yet a 3rd pregnancy. And there is emotional impact with that. It's not just as like, it's not like picking coffee. This is a big thing for someone who's been on this journey for a few years, and someone who's already experienced so much loss. And you're asking me just to like trust, and I want to, but I need another opinion, and I need to know that I'm seen. And so I went in there and I was completely dismissed. Like, I got it, but it was another experience of just being very short with me of just, this is nonsense. Yeah. And so I called my acupuncturist again, and he was like, let's just be conventional, and let's just like really, let's, do what they are suggesting. And we're going to go in there with stronger herbs, and we're going to do some other points. And let's just find plan B, because we want to preserve that tube if we can. We don't want to chance it. And so I was like, okay, that feels okay. Doesn't feel good, but it feels okay.
It feels better.
Yeah. And so we did. And it was just a few months later that I successfully got pregnant. And in between that last termination and that successful pregnancy, they did send me for another HSG to check my tubes. And the doctor was like, there's no scar tissue, there's no swelling, there's nothing wrong with this tube. And to me, that was the reward of knowing that everything I was doing fixed and solved the problems that were there. And I knew that it could happen. And I knew that there was potential and possibility. So yeah, that's my journey. And so after my daughter was born, I got pregnant really quickly. She was 10 months old when we found out that we were expecting baby number 2.
No
and
way.
then a few years later, we brought into the world our son, which was baby number 3. And so, 1 tube, 3 babies, and no real support from the conventional side of medicine, and no real solutions from the Western model versus the Eastern. The Eastern gave me lots of options and made me feel like potential was there, or possibilities. So yeah.
Wow, what a story. And as you said, it's so empowering and offers so much hope and inspiration to women who are on that journey, or women who will go on that journey. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable and delving into that, because even though it's behind you, there's still, it's a continual healing journey, I think, to talk about it and to relive it and share it with others.
Yeah. And, I honestly believe it's so, like, I was just talking with my ladies last night in my fertility program about that the trauma never really leaves. Like, it's always subtly still there. And there will be things that happen in everyday life that infertility trauma seeps back in. But then there's this remembrance of everything that you did and persevered. And then how you can take, I don't want to say lessons learned, because I don't always like that there's a lesson to be learned in something, but that there was a takeaway experience that was nourishing for me, that then feeds other aspects of my life. So that, when my children get ill, or when I experience something in my body that makes me go, uh-oh, is something wrong, I have the tools and the resources now to reground me, and then to seek a wide variety of advice, and know that there's a million different ways to get the same result. And so now I'm just in this search of really feeling out for the information of what feels best for me, and what feels like, yeah, no, what you're sharing with me, that's what I want. And knowing if I don't receive that, I just have to keep looking, and I will find it. And you don't have to look far. I have such an amazing team of resources now for my day-to-day life that all came into my life through my fertility journey. I know that I have this web network of practitioners and healers and physicians, like doctors, that I know that I can lean on, and I can trust that they are going to hold space, see me, listen to me, and then give me what their opinion is of where to move forward. And then I can choose what elements from all of them I can use to make my story and to find my success. So the trauma never always leaves, but the trauma always kind of carries this light of hope in us, this light of magic, of the possibility of what's still yet to come.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I think when we have hope, anything is possible. And hearing you talk, the passion that you have for the work that you do, and just being so attuned to your own body, that was a journey for me too, of actually really understanding that we have all the answers inside, that our body is giving us everything that we need to know about ourselves. It's just, we need to get still to be able to hear that wisdom. So we've talked about hope. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in relation to hope? When hope is not on your side, how do you find that hope? How do you dig deep?
Yeah. So for me, what I always try to remind myself and remind the women that come into my life in whatever capacity is that hope, we've been trained to see hope as a feeling, as it's hope or it's depression, it's hope or it's despair. It's a feeling, it's a felt sense in the body. And what I like to see hope now as is not a feeling. It is one of the many tools that can help me deepen into my journey. Because when we have hope, we open ourselves up to curiosity. When we have hope, we have the potential to create alignment in our life. When we have hope, we seek out what is it that we truly need. When we have hope, we build deeper relationships with ourselves. So I see hope now not as a feeling, like I hope that this cycle I'm going to get pregnant. Instead, I see hope as, okay, I have hope. So now this is giving me this inner fire, like it's lighting me up to go and be resourceful, to go out and forge the world for what it is that I need, whether that be an actual like technique practitioner, whether that be a felt sense, whether that needs to be like a connection with my body. But I like to think of hope no longer as it's this feeling that can be taken away from me. Instead, I like hope to be this thing that keeps me inspired to know that there's so much more out there for us. Because when we have hope, we feel empowered. And when we feel empowered, the world is our oyster, literally our oyster. There is so much out there if we feel empowered. And the problem with the fertility journey is that it is probably one of the biggest disempowering experiences of our life, because there is nothing worse than deeply desiring something so much, but not knowing what the tools are to achieve that. How can I obtain that? When we want a house, we know the formula of how to get it. When we want a relationship, it may be hard, but we know the formula. We have options, resources. When we have infertility, we go to the doctor saying, I'm broken, fix me. And that's not empowering. That's, in fact, disconnecting us even further from our body. And that's not to say that I can't, like that doctors are bad. This is to say that I hope my big audacious goal for the world is that at some point, health and doctors and medicine is not about always trying to label, but rather to encourage exploration, right? Because there are so many things: nutrition, stress reduction, meditation, cycle awareness, like all of these things to get us home into our body can be so resourceful. It doesn't mean that we don't do the surgery for fibroids. It doesn't mean that we don't do IVF or IUI. What it means is that when we choose to do these other interventions, that we have all this other stuff to help keep us rooted and to give us something so that we're not just living in a place of brokenness and disempowerment, but rather it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to help me with all this. Great. And now I'm going to do all these things so that I feel super good about it and that I'm empowered about it. But we can't say that we're not broken if we don't have any tools to empower ourselves. So we need that idea, that curiosity of hope to really help us seek out our own inner empowerment. And a lot of times that empowerment comes through inspiration. And like I said, when back 10 years ago, Google told me there was nothing. It's pretty bad when your Google search comes up with nothing positive. But the beautiful thing is that fertility is now such a big thing. And so many people are talking about it, which is the first step. The more people talk about it, the more you're going to hear about these success stories that didn't exist. And it's not that the success stories didn't exist. It's that the stories were not printed and put online for us to be aware of them 10 years ago, where now people are sharing. And that is so empowering. And that's so inspiring to know that there are so many ways to achieve, and I don't want to say pregnancy, to achieve your family, right? Some of that is going to be through non-medical intervention pregnancies. Some of that's going to be through medical intervention pregnancies. Some of that's going to be through additional surgeries like fibroid removal, endometriosis cleaning up, whatever that might be. That's all okay. Some of it's going to be, saying, you know what, I feel like the work internally is going to make me feel too overwhelmed, or maybe put me into a worse state. And so then it's like this choice of knowing that we have surrogacy, we have choice of donor eggs, donor sperm. Like there is so many options out for us. And as we go through this journey, and as we continue to keep ourselves in an empowered and open state, we can feel into all those options, and it feels less scary. And that is the key of how we can really amplify hope, and how we can really go on this journey to optimize our fertility, is knowing that we're not out of options until we decide we're out of options. Nobody can decide that but us. And we know that on this fertility journey, because how many women have, after they've, stopped trying, or, went on to adopt and then got pregnant, how many women have hit a pause, and in that pause, they got pregnant. And I don't say that everyone should go on pause. Like, I don't like that idea of like, take a break and you're going to get pregnant, or adopt and you'll get pregnant. What I'm saying by that is that we are never without opportunity, unless if we have physically removed our whole uterus. Unless if that whole uterus is gone, that's the only way that we are saying that we are not able. And I will even argue that women who say, well, I haven't had my period for a year, I'm probably went through early menopause or whatever that might be, there are still stories that we hear of women who thought that they were menopausal that got pregnant. So, and it's not to say that like we're not supposed to get pregnant postmenopausal, but our body has different wisdom, and we have to connect with that wisdom to really know, are we actually no longer ovulating? Are we actually like past that barrier? And unless if we're past that barrier, there is so much magic in conception. And so your journey is not over until you officially say, I'm done. Not when a doctor, not when a holistic practitioner, not when a friend, not a family member, nobody else can call that but you. That's all I would kind of seal that off with.
Wow. I think there's so much wisdom in what you share. And when, as I've mentioned before, when we attune to our body, when we realize that we have choices, when we realize that it is our journey and it's our body, that's when it does become empowering. That's when we realize we have choice, and that there is so much more that we can explore. So you've mentioned, as you were talking about some tools that you use. So I know we've spoken about the sacred cycle charting. Talk to me about that. I would love to learn more about that.
This to me is like the holy grail. It's like the essence of what has been the life-changing experience that got me beyond fertility, has got me beyond motherhood, and has got me into this new place of just really connecting with my body in such a sacred, special way. So we all, I'm sure, have heard of, cycle awareness, cycle charting. You check your cervical mucus, you check your temperature, you check your cervical position, all of those things, so that we can kind of indicate where we might be on this chart of 28 days, right? Which is really interesting that when you look at cycle awareness, it's a chart that's a line, which is so not our energy. Women are cyclical. We are not a straight line, but yet, and it's not a knock against cycle charting. It's beautiful because it really does help you know a lot about what's going on with your thyroid, your ovulation. It can really tell you a lot of medical details. Like it can really help a physician to really understand your hormones. So there's a point of it, but the fact that it is tracked on a linear line, and its purpose is completely database for like someone else to fix us, I guess, like an external source of information, never really kind of settled with me. Like, I think it's beautiful. It gives so much information. And I love that you can learn so much about your thyroid and so much about your ovulation through it, but it just never really hit home. And so this is when it's really interesting how it landed in my lap. It was on a Facebook group for fertility practitioners. So anyone who was working in any kind of industry that had to deal with fertility, we were all part of this little private group. And I don't even know how. I think I made a post about, does anyone have recommendations on fertility and yoga? Because I was doing my research paper for yoga therapy to finish off that certification. And this woman from Toronto, I'm from Edmonton, so several provinces over in Canada from where I live, sent me a private message going, you need to meet Miranda Gray. She's coming to your province in 1 week. And I think you would really like this training. I had never talked to this woman before. I don't even know who she is. I don't even know who Miranda Gray is. And I was like, all right, like she's telling me I should do this. And she's on this fertility group and it's the 3-hour drive for me for a weekend. I'll sign up. Right. And I got in, it was like almost closed for registration. I got in and I totally went with there with the mindset of thinking that it was going to be about fertility because it was all about the womb. So I was like, it's got to be about fertility. And it wasn't. It was about teaching women to understand their cycle in a very sacred and ancient way of knowing with this in this inner knowing of a felt sense and connecting to it symbolically by like looking at it through the seasons, right? Because we're so deeply linked to both the earth cycle, so there are seasons, and to the lunar cycle, which is the moon cycle. And so starting to look at our rhythm and noticing and charting our rhythm and to see how that correlates to what's happening in our environment outside of us, so the nature and with the moon, and just starting to understand our rhythm in a way that to me doesn't feel like work. And so literally, rather than checking my temperature and cervical mucus anymore, I do a 2-word check-in every morning of like, how do I feel? And that can be physically, it can be emotionally, it can be energetically, but I just ask myself, what are 2 words that would describe how I feel? And it's amazing that when you do this, and we chart it in a circle, not a line. Okay. So we have a pie chart. And when you chart it this way, month after month, you will see on day 3, your 2 words are pretty similar like there's the same theme that happens. And so there's this beauty of knowing not so much about, what your potential ovulation is, but you understand what ovulation is. Ovulation is our summer season. So if you think of summer outside where it's hot, you feel energized, you're staying up way too late, potentially socializing with every friend that you can possibly cram into a few months or a few weeks, that is our ovulation. We are so full of energy. We just want to pack everything in. We stay up way too late because our pineal gland is like heightened to the moon energy. And so we can start to see these similarities. So without even doing my temperature, I know when I'm ovulating all the time now because I know of how I feel and how I'm projecting myself out in my life. And I can feel the shift when I right away go into my luteal phase. And so the reason why this is so beautiful for women is that this was the first time in my life that it helped me connect to my body through being in a relationship with my body. Just like we would wake up every morning and look at our partner and say, like, how was your day? This is what I was doing with my body. How are you doing today? What's going on? And I would listen, I would feel into. And it's really amazing that the same patterns happen over and over again. The same patterns of aches in my body happen at the same days, the same, emotional surges or my work motivation totally shift all the time, same rhythm. And so building this relationship with myself was one of the key things in helping me not feel broken anymore because I understood my body. I understood what it needed because to really balance our hormones, we can balance our hormones through pills that then like really help us to like have a strong estrogen or a strong follicular, a strong luteal. Like we can do all this hormone balancing with medicine, or we can do it with our behaviors. We can show our body that we understand that by doing this, we're feeding the hormone that's there. And by doing this, we're depleting it, right? And when you know this, you can use nutrition, you can shift your work life, your self-care practices, all of that shifts when we understand how to work in our rhythm and actually change our behaviors through a 4-part cycle. And so what I find and what I've noticed is so many women struggle in their ovulation because they're trying to be in their fall state, in their luteal phase, because they're trying to maintain that ovulation as they push through into the fall. So they're trying to be outward energy. They're trying to meet everybody's demands and to be that person of service. When in our fall, when we have progesterone and no estrogen anymore, our body's saying, be still. Our body's saying, you need time by yourself to rebalance. Your body, in many ways, is saying, we need this so that way we can become pregnant. So we have like this zone where we know that you're kind of just taking it easy. You're not pushing the limits. and then the egg can implant in. But if the body constantly feels that we're rushing, we become overwhelmed. We allow that inner critic to come in. We allow that self-doubt to come in. That 2-week wait becomes the most excruciating 2-week wait of our life.
Yeah.
And so all of this happens. And so the beautiful thing about sacred cycle charting is about how can we begin to learn our cycle, learn how we feel. And then once we know how we feel, we know how to feed it. We know how to nourish it. And we give ourselves permission to be 4 different women in 1 month. And not only is this so super empowering for yourself, it's so super empowering for all your relationships. My husband, we work on an operation around my cycle. He knows what season I'm in, and we always refer to it as seasons because it's easier for him as well. And so he'll know what season I'm in. And with that season, he can completely relate and understand what I need from him at that point, or what he can ask of for his own self, right? Like he does lots of self-care in my follicular and ovulation, which would be your spring and your summer, because I have potent energy. I have lots of estrogen that makes me want to be social and outgoing and take a lot of tasks on. And he knows that he can't ask for a lot during menstruation and in that fall, because I will start to get snappy. I will start to feel overextended, right? And so when you care for yourself this way, your hormones start to regulate because it feels that you're constantly shifting. It feels that you're behaving differently. You're no longer operating on this linear path anymore. And I think one of the most empowering things that I learned this past year, in fact, was that even men have a cyclical rhythm. It's just that men have the testosterone, the hormone testosterone, that rhythm shifts every 24 hours. So what we experience in 28 days or 30 days, whatever your cycle length might be, they experience in 24 hours, which is why we work on a 24-hour clock. So that PMS phase that we all feel grouchy and overextended, that is their like 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. So, when they come home and they're like, I just need 10 minutes because I've worked all day and I just need to go on my tablet, or they go to the bathroom for 30 minutes with their phone. It's not because they need that time for a physical act. It's because their body, they are in their luteal phase and their body is saying, I just need some time for me, right? Their menstruation is from like 12 o'clock until they wake up in the morning. They get to sleep, they get to rest, they get to nourish and rebalance. Every living creature, whether it be human or animal or plant, all needs a rest season, right? Anything that's living needs rest. But as women, with how our hormonal system works, we need that for approximately 5 to 7 days. And it's not to say that we just like lay back and sleep. It's just that we offload those mundane tasks that really overextend ourselves. The grocery shopping, the doing all the laundry, making sure that we cook meals for everybody, the running people to their appointments, or, just all those things that feel like work that every part of us says no, but we do it and then we have resentment. That is because our body's saying, listen, you're not slowing down. You're not caring for me. And so this is what sacred cycle charting or womb health is all about, is how can we get back in to the sacredness of our own body? How can we feel into what's happening hormonally in our body and connect through felt sensations versus looking for external fixes? And it's not that we can't use doctors or whatever. It's just that now we have a pattern that we can continue to nourish ourselves. It'd be kind of like telling ourselves, and I think Alexandra Pope says this in her book about how the women's cycle, if you can imagine, it kind of be like what society's asking us to do to power through our menstruation or power through our luteal phase and just kind of be the same person all the time, is essentially like telling somebody that they're not allowed to sleep at night, that their circadian rhythm means nothing, and that they just have to keep showing up. Doesn't matter how tired you are, you just keep showing up and you keep pushing and you'll feel better in a few hours. And realistically, if anybody's ever had to work a night shift, the only way you feel better is if you drink copious amounts of coffee, which then puts your adrenals into like overload and makes you stressed out. And then you're just stimulated. You're not actually moving through life with joy. And so that's what's happening in our journey. And that's what's happening in our fertility journey, is that we're moving through life without joy. We're moving through this fertility experience without any joy. And so how can we infuse it back with joy? And that's through connection to our womb, connection to a part of our body we've never been taught to touch or to feel or to sense exists within us. We're just told that it's this thing that can be removed and it doesn't really affect us. It can be medicated. It doesn't really affect us. And it does. It's so part of us. It's part of our authentic identity of who we are. That's where life is birthed, but that's also where we were birthed. That's where who we are to our core comes through, is through that second chakra, through that womb space. So that was my womb tangent. You can get me talking on the womb and I will talk for hours on the womb. My husband always jokes he can't take me to Christmas parties anymore because I'm like, so women, where are you at in your cycle?
Oh, that's so funny. I've learned so much, like seriously, just in that, 5-10 minutes that you were talking, and just all these light bulb moments for me, and just how beautiful that you can work with your husband and in that partnership and understand each other and understand what's going on with each other's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes that wisdom alone. There'll be so many women and men watching this that'll be like, okay, now I understand. Now I can look at this differently. Now we can work together. That will improve relationships all around the world. So that's your active service just there,
It's so true, because like, not only as women do we start to realize that it's okay to be 4 different personalities, but then our partners have this guidebook of like, oh, I know this. I know what's happening. And I know how I can support her, but then I also know how I can ask her to support me. So it's not just me saying, this is my cycle, show up and be of service to me. Instead, it's like, it really does deepen the partnership of, we talk about it, even when we're going on vacation in a few days here, and we know exactly where I'm going to be at on my cycle each week that we're on vacation, because it is going to affect how I can show up as a parent, how much I can tolerate in a car. It's going to change everything, right? Like, because we are driving hours. And so, and how much downtime I need in a very energetic experience, right? Because I'm going to be in that fall state and I don't want to be snapping at people. I don't want to hate my vacation. Instead, it's like, okay, let's have fun and play. But then I also need about an hour of downtime. I just need to like go inside, read a book, just like spend some time meditating, do something for me. So it's like, how can we balance everything? You don't always have to change things drastically. It's just, how can we infuse a little bit of more medicine? So many people working in, and I've heard this over and over again from so many different people working in the sacred cycle kind of environment, that it's not so much that we have to go into this deep rest state when we're bleeding. It's just that we have to do 20% less. Like, we just have to tell our body we're doing 20% less if we can't totally go into our little menstrual hut, right? Like, how can we create a lifestyle that just allows us that 20% more of us time, right? And so that's all you're trying to achieve, is just acknowledging how you're feeling. And I think the beautiful thing too is that when I react, so when I am in those fall or winter states, then the luteal or the menstruation, progesterone's a very inward energy hormone. It makes you want to go inwards. And so when I'm craving to be by myself, I no longer feel guilty or that I'm a horrible person or I can't give myself love because I've snapped at somebody or because I've had to say no. I've had to use the power of no about, going out for dinner or driving someone to an appointment or, overextending myself. I'm allowed to set boundaries. And before, I would feel like I don't want to say bad person, but you always feel guilty. It's like, oh, I just need to get off the couch and just do something and I'll feel better, right? Like, I should just do this. Where when we're in those 2 later phases of our cycle, our whole body's asking us just to be. Can we just be with ourselves? Can we be in an experience? And can we just not do? And so now there's just so much more self-compassion when I'm like, I feel myself, this rising, snapping energy. And that's my body saying, go take a time out, go be by yourself and you'll feel better. And so we have this resource now so that we're not depleting ourselves. Because this is the other key when it comes to understanding our body, is that so much of, like, we know this now, that stress is becoming a major contributor to so many diseases. And so if we're constantly putting our cycle under stress, we're kind of aiding that overload of cortisol, that overload of adrenaline, and we're not really nourishing to balance those other hormones so that we can have, well, not that we can, so that we can have an easier process in achieving pregnancy, right? Because we know that stress affects our fertility journey. And being disconnected from our body is just one more form of stress that we're not acknowledging. We acknowledge work stress, we acknowledge environmental stresses, but we don't acknowledge our own cycle stress as well. So
yeah, and I think that journey of honoring ourselves, and then as you've mentioned, being, not doing, has been such a key component of my life. And I may not be on my fertility journey anymore. I'm very blessed to be on the other side of it too, but I really don't feel guilty anymore for listening to my body and resting. And, you know, every day I will have 20 minutes minimum of meditation. Sometimes I have a little afternoon siesta so that I can be the best version of myself when my children come home from school, and I can be there for them. But I'm not trying to be there for everybody else at the expense of my own health and well-being. And I think when we give ourselves permission and we honor ourselves in that way, our life changes, not just our fertility journey, but our whole life changes. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing it with such passion, and, you know, helping other people to really realize that there is another way of living life, regardless of where we're at on our journey.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing I would just like really shortly add in there is that sometimes we are aware of living cyclically in our life, is that we start to see that it's not that the things that we're doing are bad. It's just that we can allot them to a better time. So that way it is actually nourishing versus putting us in that stress state. So even as a yoga therapist, all of my yoga programs, whether I work with people privately or in my group coaching, is that we do it around the cycle. What movement will benefit the cycle the most? And so it's not like half the yoga is bad or flow yoga is bad. It's just that there's an optimal time that when we do it, our body takes it all in and uses it as medicine. And then there's times where we do it and our body's like, okay, I'm doing it. It's supposed to feel good, but I really don't want to be here. And then it's depleting us, right? At any point, whether it be a movement practice, a thought, an emotion, if it's depleting us, then it's not our medicine. It means that we need to find something else or reframe our thinking around it.
Absolutely. Yes. I know that you have a free gift that you would love to share with our audience. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I have a masterclass available for anybody who wants to watch it. And in my personal opinion, I think it's one of the most potent tools that I have been able to create and offer out into the fertility world. And it's called The Art of Rewriting Your Fertility Journey, or your fertility story. And it really is, it's a short little video, but it takes you through an exercise, an experience of how to identify what you're currently feeling in your body, actually looking at your story. What have you been telling yourself, telling the world, telling your doctors? What is this story that is now the story that really makes you feel disconnected, broken, not empowered at all? What's going on? Right. And so I lead you through this experience of how to map that out and how to draw it out so that you can see what your living reality is. And then you sit with that and think, is this actually how I want to feel? Is this actually nourishing my fertility journey? And then it leads you into the next step of how we can begin to rewrite our fertility story so that we can write it in a way that is this new hope of the future, where it is the truth that we're calling in. And this doesn't mean like I'm calling in a baby. It means I see my body this way. I see the potential this way. I see all these resources and how they can help me and how that lights me up. And so we go from this experience of seeing what we are actually telling ourselves and what we actually really want to tell ourselves. And then using that story as our benchmark moving forward, that when we are going through that 2-week wait, or when we are feeling a little hopeless, or when we're feeling like we've just been bumped up against another hurdle, that we can pull out this little picture, this image that we've drawn. And don't worry, you don't have to be an artist for it, but this thing that you've created as your reminder, right? I say, put it on a bulletin board in your home office, carry a copy of it in your purse, wherever you need it, but use it as your resource to lock yourself back in when you feel like you're spiraling out, of going, yes, that's right. I do have these resources. Yes, I can visualize and I can sense and I can feel into this, and use that as your own personal inspiration story. Like, use that as this is your light, your flashlight in your journey of how you want to shift and change and feel better on this journey. And so, so it's a little workshop to get you into this embodiment practice, just so that you can feel more hopeful, feel more grounded, and just know that the journey's not over. Like, to really anchor you in that, of that there is so much more still ahead of you.
Well, thank you. That sounds absolutely awesome. And I'll put the link in the comments below in the video. How can people connect with you and work with you?
Yes. So I mainly hang out on Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at, I always say at, but searching is She Revival. If you search Kate Nguy, it'll also come up as She Revival. And she is spelled SHEE, because it's not meant based upon gender or anything like that. It's actually sacred healing through empowerment and embodiment, because that really is my philosophy, is how can we begin to heal the body through sacred teachings, through ancient teachings, and how can we do it in a way that really enriches that embodiment sense and really empowers you on the journey. So sacred healing through empowerment and embodiment. So you can find me at She Revival on Instagram. I do have a Facebook account, but like I said, I'm not on there very often, just randomly. And then my website is also sherevival.com. And once again, SHEE and then revival.com. And those are probably the best ways to like connect with me. On my website, you'll find my email address. I'm always open to people sending me emails, and if you have any questions at all, or how we can deepen into work together. And then on the fertility journey in particular, for women that are on this journey, you can work with me virtually in a group setting. We have a group coaching program called the Fertile Program, to restore and awaken your fertile body, which encompasses fertility coaching, resources, fertility yoga, and weekly mindset and exploration into awakening the feminine, awakening the cycle, conversations each week. So that's my group coaching program. It runs for 12 weeks. We're just finishing the last session actually next week. And then I'll be starting up my next session here on April 29th for anyone that's watching this now. But I do run them every few months throughout the year. So if you're not in the current one, you can always get your name on the wait list, and you'll find out exactly when you can get it slotted into the next session. And then if you want to work one-on-one for fertility coaching and fertility yoga, we can also do that virtually through my online studio. You get your own private little portal that we will meet in. We'll discuss what's going on each week that we meet, and we will craft and create a yoga practice for you that also gets stored in your little portal, so that you have your own little personal library of yoga videos and list of resources to help you move through this journey and to really create those deep embodiment practices. And that is not just yoga. We do a lot of fertility coaching in there, and a lot of cycle awareness, the sacred womb stuff that we were just talking about. We will go into that in depth and really learn about what your body is showing us through symptoms and what that might mean, and how we can try to create balance through aligning to our cycle.
So many different ways to work with you, so much choice. I really encourage people to reach out and connect with you. I've loved the connection that we have developed and the work that you are doing. I just want to give you a final opportunity just for any final words of wisdom that you want to share with people.
Don't get hung up on diagnoses. Don't get hung up on stats. Don't get hung up on what doctors are saying are your potential. There is so much mystery and magic when it comes to conception that I honestly just always encourage women to find the recipe that works for them, to listen to your own intuition, and know that this journey is never over until you say it's over. And we've seen that over and over again through so many success stories, where so many odds are beaten, where people are told that there's no hope, and yet they still achieve pregnancy. So unless you are done, there is so much opportunity for this still to happen. So if you're feeling beat down on this journey, ask yourselves, what can I do to bring more light back into the experience? How can I infuse more joy and passion? How can I get curious again? So that way I can feel empowered and not broken and not falling into that place of despair. And that can be done through so many different ways, including a really nourishing community of like experienced people who understand what you're going through. It can be through really amazing resources. It can be through reading other people's inspirational stories, but there's so much hope. And just remember, I always say this, that statistics are really only like a kind of an educated guess at what might be the outcome. There is no way to actually create statistics around anything, but particularly fertility, because you would have to test every woman. You would have to know every woman and what they're doing as extra resources, whether that's naturopathic medicine, whether that's acupuncture. Like it's too wide of a scope to ever really put it into a number. And so those statistics that you read, those statistics that you see, that's just a small control group where they did a random test, or maybe a non-random test. Maybe they had some barriers or some criteria, but still it's only a small percentage of the population. So they're assuming that that is going to kind of be the goalpost for everybody on the journey. So don't look at statistics. That would be my big piece of advice, because statistics really mean nothing. And diagnoses, don't get beat down by them. I always say diagnoses are a great thing, because we went to somebody, said, we have a problem. We know there's a problem. Explore it. Tell me what's wrong. And they explore until they find something wrong. So this is why it's always like such a shock. It's like, oh no, I have fibroids. It's like, well, you asked them to explore until they found something, and they found it now. We wouldn't have known that if we didn't go exploring. But once we know what is a potential, like a barrier that your body is putting in front of you, it's trying to talk to you. It's saying, I'm putting this here because I need you to feel something. I need you to sense that there's something off balance. And so it's bringing your attention there. Now that we know it, now this is where we get to get creative and curious, and we get to actually explore all the different ways that we can tackle it and bring it back into balance. We heal the root. And so we heal whatever is going on, and that will be healed as well. But it's a beautiful piece of information, whether you are an acupuncturist, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a yoga therapist, whether you are a mindset facilitator. It just gives us something to help you now reframe your experience around that label you've been given. It's just a label, and it will go away. So that would be my 3 pieces of advice at the end.
Well, thank you, Kate. I have absolutely loved talking to you. I've learned so much from you. I know that this community is going to learn just so much. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your passion for what you do. Thank you for sharing your story, and keep shining your beautiful light.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me once again. And I can't wait to just be a ripple of help in this big sea of all these amazing people like yourself that is trying to make the change for women on this journey, so that we can all feel better. As women, we can feel better in our bodies. We can feel better in our fertility journey. So thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Absolutely.